Welcome to literary and jury charge practice. Let's start out with a little jury charge practice. Ready? Here we go. Facts may be proved by direct or circumstantial evidence or by a combination of both. Direct evidence can prove a fact by itself. For example, if a witness testifies he saw it raining outside before he came into the courthouse, that testimony is direct evidence that it was raining. Circumstantial evidence also may be called indirect evidence. Circumstantial evidence does not directly prove the fact to be declared, but is evidence of another fact or a group of facts from which you may logically and reasonably conclude the truth of the fact in question. For example, if a witness testifies that he saw someone come inside wearing a raincoat covered with drops of water, that testimony is circumstantial evidence because it may support a conclusion that it was raining outside. Both direct and circumstantial evidence are acceptable types of evidence to prove or disprove the elements of a charge, including intent and mental state and acts necessary to a conviction. And neither is necessarily more reliable than the other. Neither is entitled to any greater weight than the other. You must decide whether a fact in issue has been proved based on all the evidence. Before you may rely on circumstantial evidence to conclude that a fact necessary to find the defendant guilty has been proved, you must be convinced that the people have proved each fact essential to that conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt. Also, before you may rely on circumstantial evidence to find the defendant guilty, you must be convinced that the only reasonable conclusion supported by the circumstantial evidence is that the defendant is guilty. If you can draw two or more reasonable conclusions from the circumstantial evidence, and one of those reasonable conclusions points to innocence and another to guilt, you must accept the one that points to innocence. However, when considering circumstantial evidence, you must accept only reasonable conclusions and reject any that are unreasonable. You alone must judge the credibility or believability of the witnesses. In deciding whether testimony is true and accurate, use your common sense and experience. You must judge the testimony of each witness by the same standards, setting aside any bias or prejudice you may have. You may believe all, part, or none of any witness's testimony. Consider the testimony of each witness and decide how much of it you believe. In evaluating a witness's testimony, you may consider anything that reasonably tends to prove or disprove the truth or accuracy of that testimony. Among the factors that you may consider are: how well could the witness see, hear, or otherwise perceive the things about which the witness testified? How well was the witness able to remember and describe what happened? What was the witness's behavior while testifying? Did the witness understand the questions and answer them directly? Was the witness's testimony influenced by a factor such as bias or prejudice, a personal relationship with someone involved in the case, or a personal interest in how the case is decided? What was the witness's attitude about the case or about testifying? Did the witness make a statement in the past that is consistent or inconsistent with his or her testimony? How reasonable is the testimony? When you consider all the other evidence in the case, did other evidence prove or disprove any fact about which the witness testified? All right, now for some literary practice. Will the book disappear? Here we go. In the future, with healthy competition, the price of books is bound to decline and more accurately reflect production costs. Many people rue the changing world. Popular bookstore chain Borders liquidated all of its stores, more than 600 in 2011. The Borders.com web address now redirects you to the website of Barnes & Noble, a bookstore chain with stores in which you can still browse the aisles and sit down with a cup of coffee. There's no denying the attraction of the physicality of the printed book, the way it looks, feels, and even smells, but there's also no denying the economics and practicality of ebooks. Will the book ever disappear? People will always need, in one form or another, the results of others' in-depth research, analysis, and storytelling. Books don't appear to have any likelihood of disappearing anytime soon. Printed books are another matter. It's likely that they will persist as well, but it's also likely that they will be produced in much smaller numbers. Just as radio found a niche after television, printed books will likely find their niche after ebooks become ubiquitous. One possibility, handsome bound books will be used in the future primarily for such specialized purposes as presentation and collecting. Just as with the prestige distinction for writers between being published in hardback or only in paperback, in the future there will likely be a similar prestige distinction between being published in print or only in ebook format. We have as far as some literary practice. This is called A Good Start. And it looks like these are students, court reporters and students, current court reporting students, answering just different questions. Ready? Here we go. You finished in the classroom part in about 18 months. What do you think helped? There isn't really one thing that I would consider the sole attribute to my success so far. So many factors continued each step of the way. One of the most important factors, though, was the incredible support system nurtured by the instructors and fellow classmates. It's such a small program that we all became a little family in a way. Robin Hennigan has told me that she claims me as her own, adding affectionately, whether you like it or not. I don't know if she's aware of just how much that means to me. I've never been in a program that is so committed to each individual student. The instructors always give detailed and specific feedback. There were several occasions when my only opportunity to complete and submit assignments was 3 or 4 days before the deadline, and I never expected to see the grades until after the due date. More often than not, Allison Kimmel, RDR, CRR, CBC, CCP, an adjunct instructor, responded with in-depth feedback within the hour. In my experience as a student in this program, I've never ever felt that I was put on the back burner, even though the instructors, in addition to teaching, are actively working in the field. I think the fact that students are capable of completing the classroom part of the program in 18 months is testimony to the instruction and their devotion to the student's success. Also, I had nothing to fall back on if I didn't complete this program as quickly and efficiently as possible. With my future and my son's well-being on the line, the idea of taking a semester off or giving up just wasn't an option. What can you tell us about your internships? The time frame for the internships will be the duration of the summer term. I'll need to complete a total of 80 writing hours, 40 hours in both official and freelance reporting. I have been in contact with Paula Blosser, our PR, Sue Terry, our PR, CRR, Tracy Coleman, our MR, CRR, and Leanne Capizzi, our MR. I am scheduled to begin my official intern experience with Coleman during the first week of June, while tentative plans have been made with the other reporters. All right, now let's practice some of this closing argument. Ready? Here we go. And of course, then there was the tug-of-war between myself and the government attorney about when did it slip. Well, I think it was when the body was still there. Mr. Foy said, "Are you sure it wasn't 5 days later?" "Oh, yeah, I think the body was there for 5 days." The body wasn't there for 5 days, but he knew somebody let it slip. Mr. Guerra, however, has a sharp memory. You could see her. Ms. Guerra, however, has a sharp memory. You could see her testifying. She didn't have any issues with not being able to remember things. And she said, "I don't remember that at all." Really? A man coming in and saying, "Yeah, my wife was shot. She didn't remember at all." Probably because it didn't happen. Kenneth White. Now, this was interesting evidence. Kenneth White is a paramedic for San Bernardino County. He works at the Phelan station there. So, of course, when the call came, he was in the group that went out and responded first. He said 2 vehicles responded. He even showed you he parked them a ways away from where they were going. He said he saw my client. He appeared to be in distress emotionally. He pointed us to the shed. We check. There was already rigor lividity. She was dead. But then, what did he say after that? He said that with Deputy Howell he walked over towards the door of the residence, and he said, as we walked over there were footsteps in the dirt coming away, and he didn't want to step on them, so he got out of the way. I said, "Did any of the other first responders go over there with you to the front door?" "No," but then he said they had all of us kind of go over off the beaten path, and they took photos of our shoes. Why is that important? Because he was the first one there, and he was the only one, according to him, of those firemen, paramedics that approached the house, and he was careful not to step in the footprints that led away from the front door. But he saw that the front door was broken into, and he walked away in a different route. I'm sorry, this podium is slippery, and they don't put one of those things at the bottom to catch the stuff. So if it looks like I'm trying to hold things on here with my stomach, I am. He testified that his diagram is not to scale. That's very important. He said that he walked in the house and he found that there was a number of items, a couple of guns, camera, a silver case piled on a blanket by the door. And I was asking, based on your experience, is that something you see in burglary cases? And he said yes. And he even called it a loot bag. Remember that? He called it a loot bag. He said, yeah, some people, they will spread a blanket out, throw stuff on it, grab it, and they can go. What he didn't explain is that why my client would know that burglars spread out something on the floor and pile their stuff, and when they are getting ready to go, they can take off quick. He said that there was a pry bar right inside the door, and you saw that pry bar. He says that things were pulled away from the wall, drawers were open, and then we have footprints that go from the back door towards the chicken coop. You have Jeffrey Lewison. He was one of the people from the coroner's office. He's the one who testified normally how rigor mortis starts, how it leaves. He said based upon this, the time of death was somewhere between 6 and 10 hours. He couldn't be more specific, but he did say that on a hot day like that day, it goes faster. In other words, it would be closer to the 6 hours than the 10. That's important because if she was killed 6 hours before my client is at San Manuel, she would have had to have been killed 8 hours before for him not to be at San Manuel. That's not strong circumstantial evidence. Then you have Jason Mccauley. Now, Jason Mccauley was an expert. He testified as an expert, and he said some very interesting things, I thought. One of the most important things he testified to was the standards at the lab, and this is the Sheriff's Department lab. And I said, you are a GSR, gunshot residue expert. He said, yes. Have you been trained? He said, yeah. I have 3 months of on-the-job training. Then I said, well, are you familiar with the FBI standards for the lab? Yeah. Are you familiar with California Department of Justice standards for the lab? Yeah. For some more literary practice. Let's see what we have. This is called Mr. Churchill Had It Right. Ready? Here we go. I've gotten postcards back saying you missed it by 5, you missed by 4, you missed it by 1. 1. That postcard was the hardest. That was when I most certainly questioned myself, thinking, what in the world must you do to pass this test? I'm a good man. I don't beat my dog. I eat my vegetables. 1G. Dave, you'll pass this test when pigs fly. Holy pocus pigless. It's an aerial assault. Why, David, did you do what you did? You didn't have to. I wanted those 3 little letters on a business card I hand to attorneys that say RPR, RMR, CRR. It ain't for the money. Oh, no, no, no. It's for the love of the game. Writing is not unlike any sport. It's not only a mental act, but a physical act as well. No practice, no gains. Jerry Rice does not achieve Hall of Fame status by merely showing up for Sunday games at Candlestick Park. No, he does it by running the same routes over and over in practice. Practice. Failed again, Dave? The morning after coming home from yet another fail. No, David, set your machine up right now and practice some more. Again and again. Neurotic. Over the top to some? Sure, I could not care less. The difference this time? I allowed myself the privilege of writing this test. No jitteriness, no nerves, just right. Edwin Lewis Cole said, you don't drown by falling in the water, you drown by staying there. As I am writing this to announce to the world I am finally a CRR. Please, this kind of notoriety one doesn't need. There is a certain amount of embarrassment, frustration, and more than enough pain sitting in a conference room watching every single test taker hand a test in to be graded, and you are the only one not handing in the test. This editorial is not for those who have taken the CRR once and passed, nor is it for those who have taken the test once, failed, and will not come back. No, this is for those who are stuck in the seemingly impossible abyss, those who cannot seem to get over that dreaded hump. Been there, done that. You are not alone. Vary your practice regime. Do something, anything differently. And that will conclude our literary and jury charge practice.